My stepmother tried to charge me rent in my father's house without knowing that the real owner was me. I was 8 years old when my mom died. Breast cancer. It happened fast, much faster than anyone expected. One day she was complaining about being tired, and 6 months later we were choosing her coffin. Honestly, I don't remember much from that time. My brain kind of blocked most of it, which my therapist says is normal. What I do remember is my dad sitting on the edge of my bed the night after the funeral, crying so hard he couldn't breathe, and me patting his back as if I were the adult and he the child. My grandparents, my mom's parents, sold their house 2 weeks later. Just like that. They had lived in that little ranch-style house in the suburbs for 30 years, and they gave it up without batting an eye. They bought this huge property in one of the nice neighborhoods of Boston, the kind with old trees lining the streets and houses that look like they're out of a magazine. It had 6 bedrooms, which seemed crazy at the time, but my grandfather said they needed the space. What he meant was, they needed to save us. Moving in together was strange at first. My dad was barely functioning, just going through the motions of existing. He would forget to eat unless someone put food directly in front of him. He wore the same shirt 3 days in a row. My grandmother basically took care of everything. Cooking, cleaning, making sure I got to school on time, helping with homework. My grandfather handled practical things like the bills, the garden, and fixing things that broke. They created this bubble around us, this little safe world where we could fall apart without everything really falling apart, you know. We developed routines, pancakes on Sunday mornings with my grandmother, movie marathons on Wednesday nights with my grandfather, while my dad worked late. Every night before bed, we would go to my mom's memorial corner in the living room, this beautiful shelf my grandfather built with her photos and some of her favorite things, and we would tell her about our day. It sounds corny, but it helped. It made her feel less absent. The first 2 years were the hardest. I saw other kids with their moms at school events and just wanted to disappear. Birthdays were brutal, holidays were worse, but my grandparents were always there, steady and solid, refusing to let us drown in the sadness. My dad slowly came back to himself. He started smiling again, laughing at my grandfather's terrible jokes, really engaging with life instead of just surviving it. By the time I was 10, things felt almost normal, different than before. Obviously, there was this mom-shaped gap that nothing could fill, but we had built something new around it. The house stopped feeling so empty. My dad started talking about the future again, making plans, setting goals. He threw himself into his work, which I guess was his way of coping. He traveled a lot for conferences and meetings, but he always came home. We were his anchor. Then one night, about a month after my 10th birthday, he sat us all down in the living room. He had this nervous energy, fidgeting with his hands, not looking anyone in the eye. My grandmother noticed it immediately. She had this radar for emotional disturbances. She put down her tea and gave him that look that said, "Whatever you're about to say, just say it." Dad cleared his throat. "I met someone," he said, "in Chicago at the Medical Devices Conference last month." The room fell completely silent. My grandfather's newspaper crinkled as he lowered it. My grandmother's face did that complicated thing where she was trying to look understanding, but you could see the worry underneath. I just sat on the rug, confused about why this felt like bad news when it was supposed to be good. "Her name is Angela," Dad continued, talking faster now as if he needed to get it all out before he lost his nerve. "She's brilliant. She works in medical sales. She has 2 kids, a 19-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. We've been talking every day since we met, and I know this is fast, but I really think it could be something special." Special? That word echoed in my head. Mom had been special. What we had here in this house with my grandparents holding us together, that was special. This felt like something completely different. But I was 10 years old. What did I know? 6 months. That's how long it took for Dad to go from "I met someone" to "we're getting married." 6 months of phone calls every night, weekend trips to Chicago, and Angela visiting our house with her kids. My grandparents were polite about it, painfully polite, but I could see the worry in their eyes every time Dad announced another visit. Angela was beautiful in that calculated way some women are. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, designer clothes that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She smiled a lot, but the smile never quite reached her eyes. Her son was a sullen 19-year-old who spent the entire first visit on his phone, and her daughter barely looked up from her tablet long enough to say hello. They didn't seem particularly interested in getting to know us, which should have been the first red flag. The second red flag was how Angela kept commenting on the house. "Now this is a property," she'd say, walking through the rooms as if she were doing an inspection. "It must be worth a fortune in this neighborhood. Oh, your father-in-law has excellent taste in real estate." She would run her fingers over the furniture, peek into closets, ask odd questions about property taxes and home insurance. My grandmother noticed. She didn't say anything directly, but I'd catch her and my grandfather having these whispered conversations in the kitchen that would stop the moment anyone else walked in. Dad was over the moon. He was so caught up in feeling alive again, in having someone pay attention to him, that he couldn't see what the rest of us saw. When my grandfather gently suggested that maybe they should slow down, take more time, Dad got defensive. "You just don't want me to be happy," he said, which was so unfair it made my grandmother cry. They wanted him to be happy, they just wanted him to be smart about it. The wedding took place at City Hall on a rainy Thursday in October. It was small, just immediate family and a couple of Dad's colleagues. Angela wore white, which my grandmother viewed with disapproval, but didn't comment on. Her kids looked bored throughout the ceremony. I wore the dress my mom had bought me for Easter the year before she died, and I spent most of the reception trying not to think about how wrong it all felt. They moved into our house the following weekend. Angela didn't ask if it was okay, didn't suggest that maybe they should look for a new place together where everyone could start fresh. She just showed up with moving trucks and started directing where the furniture should go. "We'll have to make a few changes," she announced, inspecting the living room with a critical eye. "This space has a lot of potential, but it needs an update." My grandfather's jaw tightened. "This house belongs," he started, but my grandmother put a hand on his arm. Later, I heard her tell him they had to give it time, that Dad had a right to make his own decisions, that interfering would only push him away. I think she believed Angela would show her true colors in time and Dad would come to his senses. What none of us realized was how long that, in time, would take. The changes started little by little. A new cushion here, a different centerpiece there. Angela reorganized the kitchen cabinets to make things more efficient. She replaced our family photos on the mantel with generic art prints she'd ordered online. Each alteration felt like a small erasure of Mom's presence, a slow, systematic removal of everything that made this house ours. Her kids claimed the two best guest rooms without asking. They left wet towels on the floor, played music loudly at night, helped themselves to food without offering to cook or clean. My dad's stepson crashed his car 2 weeks after moving in. He smashed it straight into a telephone pole while texting, and my dad just bought him a new one. No consequences, no conversation about responsibility, just a replacement vehicle and a pat on the back. I came home from school on a Tuesday in March. I was 12 then and found Angela in the attic with trash bags. Plural, multiple giant black bags already full and tied up by the stairs. She was humming as she worked, pulling things out of boxes and making quick decisions about their fate. "What are you doing?" I asked, already feeling a knot in my stomach because I knew. Somehow I just knew. "Spring cleaning," she said cheerfully, dusting off her hands. This attic was a disaster. I swear, people accumulate so much junk over the years. But don't worry, I'm donating most of it. Someone else will be able to use all this old stuff. Old stuff. I walked to the nearest bag and opened it. My mom's Christmas ornaments stared back at me. The ones she had made by hand, ceramic angels she had painted when she was pregnant with me. The felt snowmen with button eyes, the wooden nativity set her mother had given her, all thrown away like trash. "This isn't junk," I said, my voice trembling. "They were my mom's." Angela made a dismissive gesture with her hand. "Honey, they were taking up space. No one has used them in years. Besides, we bought all new decorations last Christmas, remember? Much prettier." I opened another bag, my mom's clothes. The sweater she wore every autumn because it was soft and smelled like vanilla. The dress she wore to my kindergarten graduation. The jacket with the broken zipper she always said she was going to fix. I pulled out a photo album and flipped through it. My mom's entire pregnancy, my first year of life, holidays, birthdays, all documented with careful detail in her handwriting in the margins. "Where are the rest of the albums?" I demanded. "They're already in the donation bags by the garage," Angela said, without even looking up from the box she was destroying at that moment. Honestly, Who needs 5 photo albums? Everyone has a cell phone now. I ran downstairs and outside. 6 more bags were by the garage door, already loaded into her car. I opened them one after the other. My mom's jewelry, her books with notes in the margins, the quilt her grandmother had made, the ceramic vase she had bought on her honeymoon, her recipe cards with splatters and real stains, letters from my dad from when they were dadding, my baby blanket, my first pair of shoes, everything. She had thrown it all away. My grandparents came home 20 minutes later and found me sitting in the garage doorway, surrounded by open bags, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. My grandmother's face went completely white when she saw what Angela had done. My grandfather made a sound I had never heard from him, something between a growl and a gasp. They called Dad from work. Angela played the victim wonderfully. She was only trying to help. She thought she was being useful. No one had told her those things were important. She had no way of knowing. How was she supposed to understand the significance of random boxes in the attic? They were in the attic, my grandfather said, his voice dangerously calm. In clearly labeled boxes, boxes that said your deceased wife's name. I was trying to modernize, Angela protested, with real tears forming now. This house is stuck in the past. It's not healthy. Everyone needs to move on. My grandmother said something then that I will never forget. You don't get to decide when we're done grieving. Dad stood there looking torn, literally turning between his wife, his daughter, and his in-laws, trying to keep everyone happy and failing miserably. In the end, he asked for peace. Just peace. Could everyone please try to get along? Angela hadn't meant any harm. She would apologize and be more careful. Next time, we would save what was left and put it somewhere safe. Everything would be fine. But it wasn't fine. We had recovered maybe half of Mom's things. The rest was gone, donated to some thrift store where strangers would handle the remains of her life without knowing what they meant. And I learned something important that day. My feelings, my grief, my memories. Everything was less important than keeping Angela comfortable. That was the new rule of the house. The chore situation started gradually, as poisonous things often do. First, it was just helping with the dishes after dinner, which seemed reasonable. Then it was the dishes plus cleaning the counters. Then it was the full kitchen cleanup while Angela's daughter sat in the living room watching videos on her laptop. By the time I was 14, I was responsible for cleaning all the bathrooms, washing my own laundry plus the household towels, vacuuming the entire first floor, and helping with meal prep. My dad's stepson, who was 21 by then and still living at home rent-free, did absolutely nothing. His excuse was that he was focusing on his athletic training, which apparently meant going to the gym 3 times a week and playing video games the rest of the time. My stepsister, who was 18 and in community college, was supposedly too busy with school to contribute. It didn't matter that I was taking advanced classes and had a heavier course load than her. Every time my grandparents pointed out the disparity, Angela had an excuse ready. Her son had potential. He needed to focus on his fitness goals. Her daughter was delicate. She couldn't handle stress. She needed support during this transitional period, and I was being taught to be responsible. Character development, Angela called it. Life skills. The inspection system began when I was 15. Angela would run her finger along the top of door frames looking for dust. She would use a paper towel to wipe the inside rim of the toilets I had cleaned, looking for any trace of residue. She would open the refrigerator and comment if items weren't organized to her liking. If she found something, and she always found something, I had to redo the entire task while she supervised. Meanwhile, my stepsister's room looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Clothes everywhere, food wrappers on the floor, moldy plates on her dresser. My stepbrother's room smelled so bad my grandmother refused to walk past it with the door open. But mentioning this only resulted in another lecture about how I shouldn't compare myself to others, how everyone contributed in different ways, how I needed to focus on my own behavior. My grandparents tried to help. They would sneak in and do things before Angela could note that they needed doing. They would take over dinner to give me a break. They repeatedly offered to hire a cleaning service, but Angela always refused. "We don't need strangers in the house," she'd say. What she meant was, "We have free labor right here." When I turned 16, I got a job at a coffee shop, partly for money, partly to escape. Angela was not happy. Your grades had better not slip, she warned. And you still have to keep up with your chores. Having a job doesn't exempt you from family responsibilities. Family responsibilities. The irony, considering her children contributed nothing but mess and expenses. My stepbrother wrecked his second car that year. He drove it into a ditch while drunk, and my dad got him out of a DUI and bought him another vehicle. My stepsister failed half of her classes and needed a private tutor that cost $300 an hour, but I needed to work for minimum wage and scrub toilets to learn responsibility. I worked 3 shifts a week after school and all day Saturday. I would come home exhausted, muscles aching, smelling like espresso and cleaning products. And Angela would be waiting for me with a list. The laundry needed folding, the floors needed mopping, the bathrooms needed attention, and could I please do it quickly because we had guests coming tomorrow and the house had to look presentable. Her kids would walk past me while I worked, not even acknowledging my existence. They would leave their dishes in the sink, leave their shoes in the middle of the hallway, track mud over the floors I had just cleaned, and when I pointed it out, I was being difficult, causing problems. I wasn't being a team player. My grandmother took me aside one night after Angela had spent 20 minutes reprimanding me for missing a spot on the bathroom mirror. "This isn't right," she whispered. "You know that, right? What she's doing to you isn't normal or fair." I knew. I had known for a long time, but what could I do about it? I was 16 years old and had nowhere to go. My grandmother had a heart attack on a Sunday morning in October. She was making her famous cinnamon rolls, my mom's recipe. She just collapsed, and my grandfather found her on the kitchen floor and called for help. But by the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. She died in the hospital an hour later with all of us around her. I held her hand as the machines beeped their final rhythm. I was 16 years old and watching my last connection to my mother slip away. The funeral was packed. My grandmother was well loved in the community. She was involved in charities, book clubs, and neighborhood associations. People I had never met came up to tell me stories about her kindness, but all I could think about was how alone I felt. My grandfather seemed to have aged 20 years overnight. Dad was devastated. Even Angela seemed genuinely sad, which almost made me feel bad for despising her. Almost. My grandfather only lasted 3 months. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I knew the truth. He died of a broken heart. They had been married for 47 years. He had loved my grandmother since they were teenagers. Without her, he just gave up. He stopped eating properly, stopped taking his medication, stopped caring. I found him in his armchair one morning, looking at peace for the first time since my grandmother had died. The book he was reading was still open on his lap. I sat with him for a while before calling anyone, just holding his hand and saying goodbye to the last person who really understood me. The lawyer came 2 days after the funeral. We were all in the living room, me, Dad, Angela, and her 2 kids. The reading of the will felt surreal, like something from a movie. My grandfather had been meticulous with his affairs. Everything was organized, documented, labeled. And then came the bombshell. "The property at this address," the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses, "was placed in an irrevocable trust at the time of purchase. The beneficiary is named as his granddaughter, and the full property will be transferred to her upon her 18th birthday." You could have heard a pin drop. Angela's face went through about 6 different expressions in 3 seconds. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice tense. "Could you repeat that?" The lawyer repeated it. The house, this entire house, the one Angela had been renovating and redecorating as if it were hers, belonged to me. It had belonged to me since my grandparents bought it. They had arranged it that way deliberately, a property in trust that would be mine the moment I turned 18. "But she's only 16, said Angela, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. "Which is why her father was named temporary administrator," the lawyer continued. "He will manage the property until she comes of age. At that time, full control transfers to her." My dad looked stunned. "They never told me," he said quietly. "I mean, I signed papers when they bought it, but I didn't realize." The lawyer pulled out an envelope. "They left a letter explaining their decision." Dad opened it with trembling hands. I watched him read. I watched his face fall apart. I watched tears begin to slide down his cheeks. He handed it to me without a word. The letter was from both of them, written in my grandmother's perfect handwriting. They explained everything. How they had wanted to protect their daughter's legacy. How they had wanted to make sure I had security and stability. something that could never be taken from me. How they were worried Dad would remarry. Not because they didn't want him to be happy, but because they had seen too many second marriages where the new spouse's priorities differed from the children's best interests. They were right to worry. They were so right. "This changes nothing for now," my dad said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We'll simply continue as we have." But Angela's expression said otherwise. She excused herself and disappeared into the bedroom. I heard muffled phone calls all night, her voice rising and falling behind closed doors. At dinner she was cold and quiet, playing with the food on her plate, while shooting me looks that gave me goosebumps. Lying in bed that night, I realized something important. My grandparents had given me a weapon. They had given me power, and in exactly 2 years I could use it. Being 17 was the longest year of my life. Knowing what was waiting at the end made each day both better and worse. Better because I had hope, worse because I had to keep pretending everything was normal, while Angela circled like a shark that had smelled blood. My stepbrother graduated from college that spring, and by graduated, I mean he finally finished his bachelor's in communications after 6 years and 2 major changes. My dad threw him a massive party, invited everyone, gave speeches about how proud he was. Meanwhile, this guy had no job prospects, no ambition, no plans other than to move back home temporarily to figure things out. He moved permanently into one of the guest rooms. At 25, he couldn't be bothered to contribute to rent, groceries, or even cleaning up after himself. My dad fully supported him, bought his food, paid for his car insurance, gave him spending money. When I asked why he got everything for free, Angela said he was finding his path and needed family support during this exploratory phase. My stepsister started college that fall at a private university costing $60,000 a year. She joined the most expensive sorority on campus. She bought a wardrobe that probably cost more than my car and went shopping every weekend with credit cards my dad paid off monthly. She called home crying about stress at least twice a week, and Angela would rush to her rescue with care packages and extra self-care money. Meanwhile, I worked 25 hours a week at the coffee shop, took online classes to graduate early, and still did all the household chores. The disparity was so blatant it would have been funny if it weren't my life. But I smiled, I nodded, and I counted the days until my 18th birthday. Angela's behavior changed as my birthday approached. She started having these concerned conversations about adult responsibility, about how turning 18 meant making mature decisions, about how everyone in a household should contribute financially. She'd bring it up at dinner casually, but pointedly, always looking at me. "When I was 18, she'd say, "I paid rent to my parents. It taught me the value of money." "Turning 18 is when you become an adult," she'd add. "That means pulling your weight." We're a family, but families run on mutual contribution. The subtext was clear. She was laying the groundwork, building a narrative, preparing to demand I pay rent in my own house. The house she didn't know was mine, the house she thought she had 2 more years of control over. My dad seemed oblivious, or maybe it was willful ignorance. I honestly couldn't tell anymore. He had become so conflict-averse that he nodded along with whatever Angela said, just wanting everyone to get along. He had stopped standing up for me years ago. He had stopped noticing when the treatment was unequal. He had chosen his new family over protecting his daughter, and we both knew it. I spent my 17th year preparing. I worked extra shifts and saved every penny. I researched tenant rights and property law. I made copies of all the trust documents and stored them in 3 different places. I contacted the lawyer who had handled my grandparents' estate and confirmed the transfer would be automatic on my birthday. I planned exactly what I would say and when I would say it. The hardest part was maintaining the facade, acting like nothing had changed, doing my chores without complaint, pretending I didn't notice the way Angela looked at me sometimes, like she was calculating exactly how much she could extract before I figured out how to fight back. She had no idea I had already won, that 2 months after my birthday I would have legal control and she would have nothing. That thought kept me going through every humiliating inspection, every unfair comparison to her golden children, every moment of being treated like a maid in my own home. 2 weeks before my birthday, I overheard Angela on the phone with someone. "Just 2 more years," she was saying. "Then it will be completely ours. I've already been talking to contractors about renovations. The property value has increased substantially. She thought she had 2 years. She thought she had time. She had no idea her time was already up. My birthday came and went without much fanfare. My dad took me out to dinner. He gave me a card with some money. Angela baked a cake and her kids signed a store-bought card without looking up from their phones. It was fine. I didn't need celebration. I needed the calendar to move forward 1 more month until I could execute my plan. That month felt like an eternity. I kept waiting for Angela to notice something had changed, but she didn't. The automatic property transfer happened silently, just paperwork being filed in some government office. To everyone in the house, I was still just the teenage stepdaughter who cleaned toilets and made coffee for minimum wage. Then came the night that changed everything. I had just finished a double shift at the coffee shop. 8 hours dealing with spoiled customers, broken machines, and a coworker who called in sick, leaving us short-staffed. My feet hurt, my back hurt. I smelled like espresso and burnt milk. All I wanted was a shower and to collapse into bed. Angela was waiting in the kitchen. She had positioned herself at the counter with a cup of tea, clearly having planned this ambush. My dad's car wasn't in the driveway. He was working late again. Her kids were in their rooms. It was just us. "Need to talk," she said before I had even put my bag down. I was too tired for whatever this was. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" She set her tea down with a definitive clink. "You're an adult now. You work, you earn money. It's time you started contributing to this household like an adult." There it was, the moment I had been waiting for. "I do contribute," I said carefully. "I clean the entire house. I cook half the meals. I do everyone's laundry. I mean financially." Her voice was sharp. "Your father and I have discussed it. You need to pay $800 a month in rent." $800. On my coffee shop salary, that was almost everything I earned. And her kids, living here for free with all expenses covered, would still pay nothing. "Does your son pay rent?" I asked, knowing the answer. "He's between jobs, he's figuring things out. Your daughter is in school, her education is expensive enough. I'm taking online classes too. Those are different, she's at a real university." Angela stood up, stepping closer. "This is not a negotiation. You are an adult living in this house. You pay rent, $800. The first payment is due at the beginning of next month." Something inside me broke. Years of pent-up anger, of biting my tongue, of playing nice to keep the peace. It all came to the surface. I was done. I was so done. "No," I said, her eyes widened. "Excuse me." I said no, I'm not paying rent. "Then you can find somewhere else to live," Angela said, her voice turning icy. "Your father will back me up on this. You can't live here for free without contributing anything." I almost laughed. In fact, I felt my mouth curve into a smile. "Without contributing anything, that's hilarious." "This isn't funny." "Call Dad," I interrupted. "Call him right now and get your kids down here. Everyone needs to hear this." "Hear what?" "Just call them. Trust me, you're going to want witnesses." Something in my voice must have convinced her this wasn't a typical argument. She called my dad, told him to come home immediately, yelled upstairs for her kids to come down. Within 20 minutes, we were all gathered in the living room like some twisted family meeting. My dad looked confused and worried. My stepbrother looked annoyed at being interrupted. My stepsister was still holding her phone, paying only half attention. "Your stepdaughter has something to say, apparently," Angela announced, her tone suggesting I was about to make a fool of myself. I looked at each of them, took a deep breath, and then dropped the bomb I had been carefully building for 2 years. "This house doesn't belong to you," I said to Angela. "It never did. It belongs to me. My grandparents bought it, yes, but they put it in a trust with me as the beneficiary. I legally took ownership a month ago when I turned 18. The silence was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Angela's face went through all the stages of grief in about 10 seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, all playing out across her features while her kids sat confused, and my dad looked like he'd been hit with a brick. "That's not possible," Angela said finally. "Your father would have told me." "Dad knew," I said, looking at him. "The lawyer told everyone at the will reading. Remember Dad's silence? It was the confirmation." Angela's head snapped toward him so fast I heard her neck crack. You knew all this time and didn't tell me." "I thought," Dad began, but she cut him off. "You thought what, that this was information you could just keep from your wife?" "It didn't seem relevant," he said weakly. "She was only 16. We had 2 years. We had nothing." Angela was on her feet now, packing. This changes everything. Every renovation, every improvement, She stopped, turning to me. This doesn't matter, you're 18 years old, you're barely an adult. You can't manage a property like this. There are taxes, maintenance, insurance. I'm aware, I said calmly. I've spent the last 2 years educating myself. I know exactly what it entails. My stepsister spoke for the first time. Wait, so this whole house is legally hers? Apparently, I said. That's so unfair, she spat. We've lived here for years, we have rights. Actually, I said, you don't. You are tenants without a lease. I could have you evicted at any time. The room went dead silent again. My stepbrother's mouth was hanging open. My stepsister looked like she was about to cry. Angela's face had gone from red to white to red again. You wouldn't, Angela said. You wouldn't kick out your own family. Family, I repeated. That's interesting. Family is making one person do all the housework while the others do nothing. Family is throwing away a dead woman's belongings. Family is demanding rent from the one person who actually owns the house. We should discuss this in private, Dad said, standing up. Everyone is upset. Let's take a breather. No, I said firmly. We'll discuss it now in front of everyone, the same way Angela wanted witnesses to demand I pay rent. Angela tried a different tactic, softening her voice. Honey, I know things haven't been perfect, but we're family. We can work this out. Maybe we just need to sit down and… I'm going to bed, I said, cutting off whatever manipulation she was about to attempt. We'll talk more tomorrow. I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, I heard Angela's voice from the kitchen. She was on the phone and had forgotten or didn't care how sound carried in this old house. I slipped out to the top of the stairs with my phone recording. I don't care what you have to do, Angela was saying. There has to be a way to contest this. She's 18 years old. She's a child. We've lived here for 8 years. That has to count for something. The other person must have said something because Angela raised her voice. Then we have to make her life here so unpleasant that she chooses to leave. Anyway, she'll be off to college soon, right? Once she's gone, we simply stay. Possession is 9/10 of the law. More conversation from the other side. I moved closer to hear. He's weak, Angela said, and I knew she meant my dad. He'll side with me if I push hard enough. We'll convince her to sell or sign the house over to us or something. She's barely an adult. She doesn't understand what she's doing. We'll get a lawyer, explain the situation, show how we've improved the property, invested in renovations. That's not how property law works, a male voice said, her brother. Maybe if the trust is legitimate, then we'll find a way to make it not matter, she snapped. Maybe she needs to go to an out-of-state college. Maybe she needs to move for a job opportunity. Maybe her relationship with her father becomes so strained she voluntarily gives up the house to avoid conflict. There are options. I stopped recording. I had everything I needed. The next morning, I waited until everyone was gathered for breakfast. Something rare. But Angela had insisted we needed to talk as a family. My dad looked exhausted. Her kids looked hungover. Angela looked determined. Before anyone says anything, I announced, I have something you need to hear. I played the recording. Every word, every plan, every casual reference to manipulating me out of my own property. Angela's face lost all color as her own voice filled the kitchen, conspiring and planning as if I were an obstacle to remove rather than a person. When it ended, the silence was deafening. My dad was staring at Angela as if he'd never seen her before. My stepsister had tears running down her face. Whether from shame or genuine emotion, I couldn't tell. My stepbrother looked furious, though it wasn't clear if at his mother or at me. This is how it's going to work, I said into the silence. You want me to pay $800 a month in rent? Fine. The 3 of you are going to pay $1,200 each per month. That's $3,600 total, which is actually below market rate for a house this size in this neighborhood. You can't be serious, Angela whispered. I consulted a lawyer yesterday, I continued. I am well within my rights as the owner. You can pay rent or you can leave. Those are your options. Your father will never agree to this, Angela said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was looking at my dad, waiting for him to defend her, to take her side as he always had. He said nothing, just sat there staring at the table, processing the fact that his wife had been conspiring to steal his daughter's inheritance. The following days were tense. Angela stopped speaking to me entirely, communicating only through aggressive notes and dramatic sighs. Her kids avoided me. My dad tried to play peacemaker, suggesting we all needed time to cool down, but even he seemed shell-shocked by what he'd heard on that recording. I thought Angela would accept defeat. I really did. I underestimated her capacity for vengeful behavior. She cornered me in the hallway on Thursday night. I was coming out of my room and she just appeared, blocking my path. Her face was calm, but her eyes were cold. "You think you're so clever," she said in a low voice, "with your little recording making your demands, but you have no idea what you've started." "I know exactly what I've started," I replied, trying to move past her. She didn't budge. "You're going to regret this. I will make your life such a hell that you'll beg for us to keep this property. Every day you spend in this house will be worse than the last, I promise you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," she smiled, and it was one of the ugliest things I've ever seen. "You may own the house, but I've been running it for 8 years. Your father listens to me. My kids will make your life impossible. You will have no peace, no privacy, no comfort. Every moment will be a battle, and in the end, you'll break. Everyone does." My phone was in my back pocket. I'd started carrying it there with the recording app ready because I'd learned that Angela's true nature only came out when she thought there were no witnesses. I pressed the button through my jeans, praying it would pick up her voice. "You can't prove any of this," Angela continued. "It's your word against mine. And who do you think your father will believe? His wife who has taken care of him for 8 years, or his ungrateful daughter who is trying to tear the family apart?" "I'm not tearing anything apart," I said. "You did that all by yourself. Keep telling yourself that. But when you're sitting alone in this big, empty house because your father chooses his wife over his daughter, remember this conversation. Remember that I gave you the chance to make this easy." She walked away. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close. Then I took out my phone and stopped the recording, clear as crystal. Another threat, another piece of evidence. I called the lawyer the next morning. He listened to both recordings, asked a few questions, took some notes. "She's not very bright, is she?" he observed. "Threatening the property owner, discussing ways to coerce you into giving up your rights. If she keeps this up, you'll have grounds for a restraining order." "I don't want a restraining order," I said. "I want them gone." "Well, that's certainly feasible. You can start the eviction process. Given they pay no rent, and there's documented evidence of threats and coercion, the process should be straightforward." "How long?" 30 days from notice, perhaps less given the circumstances." 30 days. One more month living with people who hated me. In the house my grandparents left to protect me. It felt like too long and not long enough. I didn't tell anyone about the lawyer's visit. Instead, I went to work, came home, and watched Angela pretend everything was normal in front of my dad while shooting me looks that promised violence when he wasn't paying attention. Her kids had picked up on the tension and began their own campaign of petty annoyances. My stepbrother would play music at full volume at 3 a.m. My stepsister would use all the hot water before I could shower. They would eat the food I bought for myself and leave the empty containers in my room. But every time they did something, I documented it. Photos, videos, detailed notes with timestamps. I was building a case so airtight no judge could side with them. My dad finally approached me on Saturday. He looked terrible, exhausted, guilty, torn. "I know things are bad right now," he began, "but I'm asking you as your father to reconsider. Angela spoke to a real estate agent. We could sell this house, split the proceeds. Everyone gets something. We start over somewhere new." "Split the proceeds," I repeated. "From my house." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. Grandma and Grandpa left this house to me. Not to you, not to Angela, to me, because they knew this would happen. They knew she would try to take it." He flinched. "They didn't know her. They knew her better than you, apparently." The pain on his face almost made me feel bad. Almost. But then I remembered 8 years of watching him choose her over me, defending her when she threw out my mom's belongings, letting me be treated like a maid while his stepchildren lived like kings. "You have to decide," I told him. "Either you're my father or you're Angela's husband. You can't keep being both and expect it to work. That's not fair. Neither was anything she ever did, but you never seemed to care about fairness before." He left without another word. That night I heard him talking to Angela in their room. I couldn't make out all the words, but the tone was clear. Finally, he was confronting her, telling her they needed to look for a new place, that this situation wasn't sustainable, that his daughter owned the house and they needed to respect that. Angela's response was loud enough for the whole house to hear. "If you take her side over mine, we're done." There was a long pause. Then I guess we're done." The eviction papers were delivered 2 weeks later by a uniformed officer. He knocked on the door at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday with a folder in his hand, very official and very final. I had arranged to be home from work specifically for this moment. Angela opened the door in a robe with coffee in her hand, probably expecting a delivery. Her face when she saw the uniform was priceless. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Angela, her son, and her daughter." He read the names from his folder. "That's me. What is this about?" "I have legal documents that require your signature." He held out the envelope. Angela didn't take it. "I'm not signing anything." "Ma'am, you don't have a choice. This is a formal eviction notice. You can accept the documents now, or I can leave them with you regardless. In any case, you have been legally served." "Eviction?" Her voice became shrill. "This is my home. I've lived here for 8 years. According to these documents, the property owner has initiated the eviction process. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." I appeared in the hallway behind Angela. "The owner is me," I said calmly. "I'm the one who filed the eviction." Angela turned to me, the envelope falling from the officer's hand to the floor. "You absolute—" "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, his voice firm. "I'm going to need you to remain calm. Violence or threats will only complicate your situation." "This is insane." Angela was almost shouting now. "She's 18 years old. She's a child. She can't just throw people out of their home. She is a legal adult and the documented owner of the property. She absolutely can." The officer picked up the envelope and placed it on the entryway table. "You have been served. I suggest you contact a lawyer if you have questions about the process." Angela's kids had appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. My stepbrother immediately pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is insane," he announced to his camera. "We're being kicked out of our home by our stepsister because she inherited it and is now on a power trip. You are being evicted because you pay no rent and your mother has made documented threats against the owner," I corrected. "Also, put the phone away. I do not consent to being filmed." "Public space," he retorted. "Private property," the officer said. "If the owner asks you to stop recording, you have to stop." My stepsister was crying with loud, dramatic sobs that could probably be heard on the street. "Where are we supposed to go? We have nowhere to go." "You have 30 days to find a place," I said. I was trying to stay calm, be professional, but there was satisfaction in my voice and I didn't regret it. "It's more time than most people get." Angela tried one more tactic, softening her voice, putting on her reasonable adult face. "Officer, surely you can see this is a family dispute." "She's upset with her stepmother. This is emotional, not legal. We can't resolve this without involving the courts. The courts are already involved, ma'am. The eviction is legal and binding. I'm just here to deliver the notice." He nodded to me. "Miss, do you need me to stay while they process this information?" "No, thank you. I have cameras all over the house documenting everything." It was new for Angela. Her eyes scanned the hallway, probably spotting the small security cameras I had installed 2 weeks prior. "You've been recording us." "Recording my property," I corrected, "in case anyone decided to damage it out of spite." The officer left. Angela stood in the hallway, still holding her coffee, looking as if she'd been physically struck. Her kids were both on their phones now, probably calling their dad, texting friends, posting on social media about their terrible stepsister. I didn't care. 30 days, Angela said finally. "You're giving us 30 days. It's what the law requires. After everything we've done for you." "Done to me," I interrupted. "Everything you've done to me, there's a difference." My dad came home an hour later and found the chaos. Angela had called him at work hysterical, demanding he fix this. He walked in to find boxes already being pulled out of closets, his wife packing furiously while screaming about ungrateful children and stolen property, and his stepdaughter filming everything on her phone. "Are you filming this?" he asked, looking at me. "For my protection," I said, "in case anything disappears or gets damaged." He looked around at the disaster zone his family had become. "I can't believe this is happening." "Really, you can't believe it." I put my phone away. "Dad, she tried to charge me rent in my own house. She threw out Mom's things. She made me clean up after her kids for years while they contributed nothing. She conspired to manipulate me out of my inheritance. What part of this exactly surprises you?" He had no answer. He just stood there looking defeated as Angela demanded he take her side, fight this eviction, protect his family. But for once, finally, after 8 years, he didn't rush to her defense. "I'll help you find an apartment," he said quietly. "But she's right. We have to go." The screaming that followed probably terrified the neighbors. The 30 days dragged on like years. Angela stopped pretending to be civil. She would pass me in the hallway and mutter insults under her breath. Her kids would leave messes everywhere deliberately. Trash in the living room, food rotting in their bathrooms, wet towels molding in the corners. Every day was a new passive-aggressive attack designed to make me regret my decision. I documented everything. Every mess, every insult, every attempt at psychological warfare. The cameras caught it all. My lawyer assured me this behavior only strengthened my case if they tried to fight the eviction. They tried. Of course they tried. Angela hired the cheapest lawyer she could find, probably all she could afford, and tried to argue squatters' rights, tenancy at will, anything to delay the inevitable. The judge took one look at the trust documents, the recordings of Angela's threats, and the timeline of events, and denied all motions. The eviction stood. They had to be out by the 30th day. That final day arrived with the same moving company I had hired to ensure it happened without a hitch. I wasn't risking them lingering or claiming they needed more time. The movers showed up at 8 a.m., ready to pack and remove everything belonging to Angela and her kids. Angela was ready with a speech. She had clearly prepared it, probably practiced it in the mirror. She stood in the foyer in designer clothes I'm sure my dad paid for, her kids flanking her like bodyguards, and announced to the movers, "We're leaving voluntarily. This is our choice. We've decided to walk away from this situation with our dignity intact, rather than continue living with someone so resentful and vindictive." No one believed her. The head mover just nodded politely and said, "Where shall we start, ma'am?" The packing revealed exactly how much they had accumulated in 8 years. Room after room, full of expensive clothes, electronics, furniture Angela had bought and claimed was for the house, but was clearly for her personal use. The movers loaded it all while Angela supervised with her arms crossed, occasionally snapping at them to be more careful. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. My stepbrother came out of his room carrying a box that looked suspiciously familiar. I stepped in front of him. "What's in the box?" "My stuff. Open it." "I don't have to show you." I pulled out my phone. "Open it or I call the police for theft." He opened it. Inside were photo albums. My photo albums, the ones with pictures of my mom, of my childhood, of family vacations before she died. Albums Angela had claimed were donated, but that I had never been able to find. "Those aren't yours," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Mom said I could have them," he said, but he didn't look me in the eye. "Your mom can't give away my family photos." I took the box. "What else have you stolen?" That's when I found the rest hidden in their luggage, stuffed into boxes labeled personal items, wrapped in their clothes. My mother's jewelry, her wedding rings my dad was supposed to have kept safe, the silver frame with her picture that used to be on my dad's nightstand, small valuables they thought I wouldn't notice or couldn't prove were mine. I had made an inventory. I had photographed everything valuable that was supposed to stay in the house. I had learned from the spring cleaning incident to document what mattered. Now, with the movers as witnesses, I recovered each item one by one, all while Angela claimed it was all a misunderstanding. The sheriff I had asked to supervise, because I knew they would try something, took note of each recovered item. "You're lucky she's not pressing charges," he told Angela. "Theft is theft, even among family." "We're not family," I said clearly. "We never were." My dad arrived as the last boxes were being loaded. He looked terrible, as if he'd aged 10 years in 30 days. He had helped them find an apartment, a small 2-bedroom in a building with thin walls and no parking. He was going to stay with them temporarily while they figured things out. The downgrade from this house to that apartment must have been brutal. He approached me while Angela supervised the final loading. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have protected you." I should have realized what was happening. "Yes," I agreed, "you should have. Your mother would be disappointed in me. She'd be disappointed you let someone throw out her belongings and didn't stand up for your daughter." I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. "You chose Angela every time you chose her over me." "I know." Tears were running down his face. "I know that now, and I can't take it back. But I'm choosing now. I told Angela I'm filing for divorce." That surprised me. "Really? Really?" Hearing those recordings, seeing how she treated you, watching her try to steal your inheritance. I can't pretend anymore. I married someone I didn't really know, and I let her poison our family. Our family was already poisoned, I said. Mom died and we never really recovered. We just built something new around the wound. Angela took advantage of that. The movers finished. Angela's car and a rented truck were packed to the brim. Her kids were already in the vehicle, refusing to say goodbye. Angela took one last look at the house, her expression promising future retribution. Then she got behind the wheel without a word. My dad stayed. Can I call you? Maybe get coffee sometime. Maybe, I said, after your divorce is final, after you've shown you can actually stand up for yourself without anyone pressuring you to. He nodded, accepted the boundary, and left. I watched as the vehicles drove away, taking 8 years of misery with them. The house was finally and truly mine. Silent, empty, clean, and mine. I went back inside and locked the door behind me. The first night alone in the house was surreal. I walked through all the rooms, running my hands over surfaces that no longer needed inspection, opening closets that contained only my things, sitting in chairs without wondering if someone was going to criticize how I was sitting. The silence was profound. After years of tension and hostility, the absence of them felt almost loud. I spent the first week just cleaning, really cleaning, the kind that goes beyond surface maintenance. I scrubbed away 8 years of other people's presence. I opened the windows and let the fresh air sweep through the rooms that had felt stifling. I took down Angela's tacky decorations and stored them in the garage in case she tried to claim I'd stolen them. The second week I started reclaiming the spaces. My stepbrother's room became my home office. I bought a decent desk, set up my laptop, created a workspace that was truly mine. My stepsister's room became a yoga studio, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the peace or privacy to attempt. I rolled out a mat in the empty room and followed beginner videos on my phone, enjoying the luxury of knowing no one would walk in and mock me. I found things while cleaning. My mom's Christmas ornaments, which Angela had claimed were donated, but had really just been hidden in the back of a closet. Photos that had been taken out of frames and stuffed in drawers, little pieces of my childhood that had been erased but not destroyed. Each discovery felt like reclaiming a piece of my mother. My mom's best friend contacted me 3 weeks after the eviction. She'd heard through mutual friends what had happened. Small communities talk, especially when there's drama. She asked if she could visit. I said yes, hungry for a connection with someone who had actually known my mother. She brought old photos I'd never seen, stories I'd never heard. We sat in the living room, my mom's living room, not Angela's, and talked for hours. When she mentioned she was looking for a new place after her roommate moved out, I offered her the guest room. Having her in the house felt right, like a piece of my mom's history coming home. The house slowly transformed. It stopped being the place where I was mistreated and became the sanctuary my grandparents had intended. I cooked my mom's recipes from the cards I'd saved. I hung photos of my grandparents in places of honor. I planted flowers in the garden, the ones my grandmother loved, the ones Angela had ripped out to make space for decorative rocks. Dad called occasionally. True to his word, he had filed for divorce. Angela was fighting it, of course, trying to claim she deserved half of everything, despite their prenup. She had started a social media campaign about being abandoned by her husband and abused by her stepdaughter. People who knew us didn't believe it. People who didn't know us did. But I didn't care about the opinions of strangers. My dad and I met for coffee about 2 months after he left. He looked better, lighter. The divorce is complicated, he said, but he was standing firm. He had moved into his own apartment, away from Angela and her kids. He was in therapy. He had left his high-stress job and taken something with better hours and less travel. I'm trying to be the person I should have been, he said, for you, for your mother's memory. I appreciate that, I told him. But you need to do it for yourself, not for me. We were rebuilding, slowly, carefully. There was a lot of damage to repair, years of bad choices that couldn't be undone with apologies, but he was trying and I was willing to meet him halfway. That seemed enough for now. I started therapy too. It turns out 8 years of emotional abuse leaves marks that don't just disappear because the abusers are gone. I needed help processing the anger, the resentment, the complicated guilt that sometimes surfaced when I thought about how hard I'd been. My therapist assured me the guilt was normal, but misplaced. I had protected myself and my inheritance. That wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Work became easier, without the stress of home life crushing me. I was promoted to shift supervisor. I started taking real college classes instead of just online courses. I made friends with coworkers who knew nothing about my history and just liked me for me. I built a life that was mine, completely and totally mine. 6 months after the eviction, I was doing yoga in my studio when my dad told me Angela's family had moved out of state. Apparently, the apartment had been too expensive, the area too judgmental once people found out what had happened. They had relocated somewhere cheaper, somewhere with no memories of their failed attempt to steal a house. I felt nothing hearing that news. No satisfaction, no relief, not even curiosity about where they'd gone. They had simply stopped mattering. That, more than anything, told me I was healing. The house my grandparents bought to save us had fulfilled its mission. It had sheltered us through grief, provided stability when everything else was falling apart, and ultimately protected me from people who saw me as an obstacle rather than family. Every room held memories of my mom, my grandparents, the good years before Angela came. Standing in my kitchen, making my grandmother's cinnamon rolls, I felt my mother's presence, not like a ghost story, but in the recipes I knew by heart, in the laugh I'd inherited, in the stubbornness that had allowed me to fight back. She would have been proud, I thought. Proud that I'd stood up for myself, proud that I'd protected what her parents built for me. The house was finally what it was always meant to be, mine.